words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts together be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, for you are a rock and a redeemer. We love you and care for you, and we give you thanks and praise. Amen. The title of this morning's sermon is Nevertheless, She Persisted. Nevertheless, she persisted. Now, the book of Samuel is one of my favorite books because I like the narrative story. It's almost, you can almost say that it almost reads almost as a science fiction story almost. You can read it, it reminds you of the great epics, it reminds you of, I would say, like almost Star Wars in the sense of this young boy in the hinterlands, like the Luke Skywalker or something. But the book of Samuel was originally just one big, gigantic book. It was one book, one unified book, the book of Samuel. And it was split in two because of length. From it was translated into Greek, the Greek translation of the Septuagint. And what's interesting is that the book of Samuel continues the story of the Hebrew Bible from Judges. Now if you look in your Christian Bible, when you have your free time, look in your Christian Bible, you'll see that Ruth is in front of Samuel. And we as Christians did some reordering of the Bible. We kind of moved some things from where they originally were and kind of did some redecoration. And so we moved the book of Ruth from the Jewish writings, which consists of poetry and song. And then we moved it into what is called the historical books, or what is called the former prophets. So, if you pay attention, so we begin with Judges, and then we're going into Samuel. And Ruth is kind of stuck in there for other reasons we actually might get to a little bit later. But the reason why I like Samuel so much is because of the storylines, like I said. Beginning with this family drama of Hannah, Elkanah, and Peninnah, all leading to Samuel's birth. And you can see the full body characterization of people in the text. In the book of Samuel, you see good and evil, and you see the shades of gray with Saul and David and Jonathan and all the different characters and all the different folks who are in this story, in the text that we hold so dear. And the text grabs you from the very beginning. And as I read Samuel this morning, as I read it more than this morning, but as I read it, I feel Hannah's pain. I can understand her longing, her embarrassment. And then we also rejoice with her, though, when God answers her prayers. Now we have to understand that in this narrative understanding of text, and we have to understand these books serve different purposes from the purposes that we've made them actually function. In terms of, these are the great stories of the Hebrew people, but these are not historical texts in the same sense of a history book. That is not the case, and neither it should have ever been taken that way. But these are the stories of true people and true situations. But they are in a narrative form. That's simple. So what we have to understand is that when we're reading stories, when we're reading narratives, everything means something, and it means something bigger than the actual plain text. So the name Elkanah means God has created or God has taken possession. The name Hannah means charming or attractive. The name Peninnah means fertile or prolific. And we know that Samuel means I have asked him of the Lord. See, we have to understand that as we read the narrative, we find out that this family drama that we're seeing in 1st and 2nd Samuel is a mirror to Israel's national drama that will take place over the next 500 years. The rivalry between Hannah and Peninnah mirrors the rivalry between Israel and other nations. As the Hebrew people have settled into this new territory and they become the nation of Israel, the rivalry between nations and people ask and force people to do interesting things and ask for interesting things. As we know, God set Israel apart with no king. They were set apart with judges to live a different life. This is a community that has come out of Egypt and has rejected Egypt fully and completely. Where Egypt has wonderful pictures and wonderful gods and wonderful king gods, gods that are functioning as deities, they have no God but the God of Israel. And they have no king. They have no graven images. They are setting themselves apart from the other cultures in the area. And they are saying that they are different. But as they have developed now, and as the judges don't act as well as they should act, we see that they are asking for things as a nation like other nations. So, again, we have a nation with one God in the midst of a nation of people with multiple gods. We have a nation with no graven images in the midst of multiple countries with artistic wealth. When you look at the archaeological evidence, and this is what's fascinating about it, is that part of the issue is that there are no graven images, which means sometimes you can't prove that Israel exists. To a certain extent, a lot of the archaeological evidence didn't get proven until they started finding the coins and other things. But in terms of looking for, they're looking for a picture of David. There is no picture of David because there are no graven images. And so what's interesting is that in this world, this different world that Israel's trying to live in, we see them going down the road to be like other nations. Now the mirror, or I would say more, the microcosm of the family drama leads in a different direction. That Israel's national drama leads. The family drama between Elkanah, Peninnah, and Hannah shows, number one, why one wife or one spouse should be good enough. You don't need more than one. But in the Jewish tradition, it was tradition to have more than one wife. But you had to have the financial means to support that extra wife. You also had to provide separate accommodations for each wife. So if you had a tent for her, you had to have a tent for her. And to have multiple wives, you had to have multiple wives' money. It's that simple. What's interesting is that what we find out is that, the concept of polygamy in terms of that doesn't even get really reworked in the Jewish context until actually the 10th century AD. So what shows is that when we apply that to Jesus and Joseph and Mary, it just shows how poor they were. Because Joseph could have multiple wives. It shows the poverty of Israel at the 1st century AD. It's not that it was that they had changed the idea to biblical marriage. No, biblical marriage is multiple wives. People don't pay attention to that. But, biblical marriage is also that the wife is owned by the man. So watch out what you mean and what you say when you say you like biblical marriage. Because I highly doubt that you're interested in being owned by your husband, if you're a woman. And I highly doubt that your wife, if you're a man, will say, yes, I am open to being owned by you. Trust me, my wife is not interested in being owned by me. But that's when you say those words, that's what you have to understand what you're saying. So the biblical marriage issue here is an issue about living and how do you live in the world, especially with Hannah. How do you live in the world and how do you stay faithful to God in the midst of bad family dynamics, rivalry, jealousy, and good old-fashioned bullying? So Hannah has all the signs of what we call depression. She is crying, she's not eating, she's sad, and of course, Elkanah is the typical guy because he's trying to cheer her up by making it about him. Don't you love me more than 10 sons? Like, no. Let's not do this. But this is not clinical depression. This is situational depression. And this is from her barrenness. Because you have to understand that in that society, children are the Social Security. So what we see in the book of Ruth, and that's why it probably got moved, is that you see what happens to an individual when they don't have the child nor the husband. Now, of course, again, it probably shouldn't have ever been moved, you know what I'm saying, because that's not the purpose of that book. But it does help elucidate what we're getting at. Is that Hannah, when Elkanah goes, no matter how much he loves her, when he passes away, she is at the mercy of Peninnah and her children. So, yes, there's this yearly bullying that's going on, but this bullying is leading to the reality of what, and who knows what she's saying, we don't know what she's saying, but it's like, well, you know when Elkanah dies, you get out. We know how family dynamics work. We know how folks start hitting below the belt in families. You know, I'm sure we've all heard the conversations of, when grandma gone, I ain't talking to y'all no more. So we know how this can lead us. Now, it's helpful to remember that this is not the first time we've seen rivalry between wives. We've seen it in Genesis with Hagar and Sarah, and we've also seen it with Rachel and Leah. But Hannah is the first wife of Elkanah, so she is the one who has the place of honor. She is the one who is supposed to be the manager of the household at the same time. And so what Peninnah is doing is not only insidious and wrong, but just straight up disrespectful. Because the taunting and the bullying is a sign of weakness and fear. Because the reality is, if Hannah has children, guess who gets everything? Sammy. Gets it all. Because she's the oldest parent. She's the first wife. It's primogeniture. It's just like in terms of the British monarchy. In terms of why Prince Charles becomes king instead of Prince Andrew. The firstborn. And the first wife. And so that guy, Samuel, would become head of the family. But in the vow, Hannah makes a vow in verse 11, and she gives her future away. By dedicating Samuel to God, she is getting right what the monarchy gets wrong. You see, Hannah, in her persistence in the midst of annual abuse, of desperation and derision, she knows that the love will keep her through. But by giving Samuel to God, she's giving up that same birthright that is supposed to be so scary to Peninnah. Hannah's persistence in the midst of this abuse leads the priest Eli to think that she is drunk. But then she says the only thing that she is pouring out is herself. As it says in verse 15, she says that she is deeply troubled, which means it almost translates to be she has a hard spirit or a hard breath. It is hard for her to breathe. As she is living with this anxiety, as she is living with this anger. But nevertheless, she is persisting. Nevertheless, she persists were the words that were used by Senator Mitch McConnell on February 17, 2017, to describe Elizabeth Warren when she was protesting from the Senate floor the appointment of Jeff Sessions to the office of Attorney General. She was reading the words of Coretta Scott King, and she was preaching, I would say, to the reality of what justice should be because of the actions and the love that she had, that Coretta had for her husband, and the love that she has for this country that she never was able to articulate. And not articulate, but I would say attain. In this letter, it talks about how Jeff Sessions is not the right guy for the job. But to get to the main point of it, what Mitch McConnell says is Senator Warren was giving a lengthy speech. She had appeared to violate the rule. She was warned. She was given an explanation, Nevertheless, she persisted. That statement has become a feminist rallying cry and has even become a children's book. Nevertheless, She Persisted is a book by Chelsea Clinton that features American women and the differences they made in our lives. You know, as it talks about the persistence of Rosa Parks. It talks about the persistence of Ruby Bridges. This persistence that exists with Hannah and continues to be with every single person who's been fighting a good fight over the past, I would say, 3,000 years, has been birthed and born from women who have become the underdogs of society and the ones who are going to give birth to the truth of what God wants us to live in our societies. She persists. Hannah persisted in the midst of this family drama. And in the midst of the family drama, God had the final say. In the midst of the national drama that Israel had, God had and still will have the final say. Because we have to understand that we all have to persist through family drama. We have to persist through national drama. We have to persist like Hannah. We have to persist like Mary. We have to persist like Elizabeth. We have to persist like Priscilla and Aquila, one of my favorites from the New Testament. We also have to persist like Harriet Tubman, Coretta Scott King, Elizabeth Warren, and even Maxine Waters, when she says that she is reclaiming her time. We will persist like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we will persist in the midst of defeat, like in Georgia with Stacey Abrams. We will persist because our hearts exult in the Lord. We will persist because our hearts and our strength is exalted in our God. We will persist because we rejoice in our victory. We will persist because our God exists and our God lives. And our God lifts us up. The biblical narrative, the biblical story, the biblical witness that stands in relationship to us continues to preach that with God's love and our persistence, we are able to do and to become more than we ever thought we could become. The walls that people build will fall down, and the barren who cannot give birth do give birth. We persist because she persisted. We persisted because we will persist because a woman persisted for every single one of us in birth. In the midst of pain, in the midst of trial, in the midst of tribulation, in the midst sometimes with no, what do you call it? The thing is in the back. I can't think of the word. Anesthesia. Someone persisted for us. They persisted in our birth. And through that witness, we are able to have the first contact with God's world with us. The idea of creation takes place with that woman who we call mother. It takes place with the woman named Hannah. It takes place with Miriam. It takes place with Mary. She persisted. And so we shall persist. Let us follow her in following God's glory. Amen and amen.